Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sheila von Wiese. Sheila von Wiese was born into a loving and respectful family. However, as she grew older, she struggled to instill these values in her daughter, who became stubborn and disobedient, eventually leading to tragedy. On June 10, 1952, Neil Wiese and Liz Lenore Allen welcomed their daughter, Sheila. Neil was a World War I veteran who had served in the United States Air Force, and Liz worked as an accountant. The couple had 3 children, Sheila, Bill, and Deborah, and they lived in Minneapolis. Sheila did very well in school and was an excellent student. She then went to Boston University, graduating with a master's degree in political science. After graduation, she worked at a publishing house, where she interacted with several famous people. One day, Sheila met James Mack, a well-known conductor, composer, producer, and arranger in the music industry. At that time, James had children from a previous marriage. But this did not stop him from starting a romantic relationship with Sheila. Their relationship quickly advanced, and they soon got married. After the wedding, the couple moved to a small town in the district of Foran. There, they got involved in community activities and even organized performances in their backyard. In October 1995, her daughter Lois Heather Mack was born. At 43, Sheila was overjoyed to welcome a healthy baby girl. She and her husband, James, showered Lois with love and enrolled her in a top preschool and school. However, some relatives felt that Sheila spoiled her daughter. In 2001, Sheila and James planned a vacation and bought tickets for a Mediterranean cruise, they taking Lois along. Sadly, during the trip, James suffered a serious leg injury that was not properly treated, resulting in partial paralysis. The family later filed a lawsuit against the cruise company for damages, but the legal process took more than 9 years to resolve. On July 20, 2006, the family went on a trip to Athens, where James later died in their hotel room. His death was recorded on August 6, 2006. After his death, James Maxwell was revealed, stating that his daughter Lois Heather would inherit $1.5 million. The relationship between Sheila and Lois was strained. Lois often displayed disruptive behavior, throwing tantrums, and even attacking her mother. Since 2008, police reports have documented 35 incidents of domestic violence in Sheila's household. Additionally, Lois often ran away from home, prompting Sheila to file a missing persons report. Friends of Sheila's have reported that she sought help from various psychologists to deal with the situation. During this challenging period, Lois was a middle school student at Oak Park and River Forest School, where her talent for dancing started to show. She generally behaved well in school, but discussions about her relationship with her mother would often lead to her becoming upset. At that time, she was dating a boy named Tommy Schaefer, who was 2 years older than her. Tommy had a history of legal issues due to minor offenses. Tommy had many friends. He was especially close to his cousin Robert Bibbs. In 2011, Sheila's family's lawsuit after James injured his leg on a cruise was settled, resulting in a court judgment awarding her family $340,000 in damages. Since James had died, the money was supposed to go to Lois as stated in his will. However, for reasons that are unclear, the judge ordered the money to be sent to Sheila, which increased the conflict between Lois and Sheila. Her resentment towards her mother grew, and she made numerous threats against Sheila. By 2013, Sheila, concerned for her safety, hired a private investigator because Lois had begun to stalk her, closely monitoring her routes, schedules, and daily routines. There was animosity between them, which made their trip to the Greek coast seem unusual. However, nothing catastrophic happened during that time. In 2014, Tommy and Lois began seeing each other more frequently. Despite Sheila's objections, The situation escalated when Lois stole Sheila's bank card at a hotel party and spent over $1,000. Her mother threatened to report Lois to the police, blaming her for many problems, including the death of her father James. Tensions rose, leading Lois and Tommy to consider a drastic solution to their problems, as Sheila was seen as an obstacle to accessing the family's finances. Despite their strained relationship, Sheila and Lois traveled to Bali together in August 2014. The mother hopes that during her 10 days here, her daughter will reconsider her feelings and stop resenting her. They stayed at the St. Regis Hotel in Bali. On the day they arrived in Bali, Lois texted Tommy, confirming that everything was going according to plan. She then stole her mother's credit card again and bought a $12,000 ticket for Tommy. He arrived on the island just 12 hours later. Meanwhile, Lois was arguing with her mother at the hotel, this time about the news of her pregnancy. Tommy then went to the hotel where Sheila and Lois were staying and got involved in the fight. He hit Sheila in the face with a metal crowbar, killing her instantly. Tommy told his cousin Robert what had happened. Lois and Tommy then put Sheila's body in a suitcase and asked a porter to leave it in the hotel lobby while they called a taxi. The taxi arrived within 10 minutes and they quickly loaded the suitcase containing Sheila's body into the trunk to leave Bali as soon as possible. However, Sheila had previously warned the hotel staff not to accept any payments made with her card without her presence, knowing that Lois often stole her cards. As a result, Lois had no money and the couple were unable to pay for their hotel room. They fled without paying the bill, leaving their passports in the hotel safe. Without these documents, they cannot go to the airport. Lois and Tommy asked the taxi driver to stop at a budget hotel called Rita Valley, which they had just passed. They left their suitcases in the taxi and asked the driver to wait 10 to 15 minutes while they checked in. However, 2 hours had passed, and the driver became impatient and went into the hotel himself, but found their room empty. Lois and Tommy had checked in there but had quickly fled. Frustrated, the taxi driver returned to his car and noticed that the suitcase was leaking a red liquid. Suspecting foul play, he called the police. When the police arrived and opened the suitcase, they discovered Sheila's body inside. Forensic experts later concluded that she had died from facial fractures that had blocked her airway. In addition, her fingers were broken and her body was covered in bruises. The heartbreaking news of Sheila's death reached her family, prompting her sister, Deborah, to begin searching online for information about the case. All she found was a photograph of a suitcase. As details of the murder were reported in the media, public interest grew. Staff at the Rita Suitcase Hotel informed police that a young couple had checked in that night without luggage. When hotel staff asked them to provide their full names for internet use, they complied, knowing that this was required. The police were quick to obtain the couple's information. Police began to go to the room the couple was staying in. Hotel staff said the room had been searched and was empty. However, the couple had secretly returned to the room because they had nowhere else to go and were exhausted. They were sleeping when police found them. Lois and Tommy were taken to the police station for questioning. They gave conflicting stories about being attacked by a gang at the St. Regis Hotel and claimed that the robbers had killed Sheila. While the couple's testimony was inconsistent, the hotel staff and taxi driver remained consistent in their tests. As a result, Lois and Tommy were arrested for murder. Lois became angry, shouting that she was innocent and demanding a lawyer from the United States. The couple appeared on public television in Indonesia, with the report filmed from the police station. Tommy covered his face with a t-shirt, while Lois smiled and smoked a cigarette. They were then transferred to Lesenpar prison, which houses serious criminals and murderers. Sheila's body was returned home for burial. Her case attracted international attention. During the proceedings, Lois underwent several psychological evaluations, but the results were not considered in the verdict. As the investigation progressed, police discovered more details about the case and the media reported that Lois was pregnant. Then on March 17, 2015, a baby girl named Stella was born. The police allowed Lois to see her baby, but only within the confines of the prison. The baby was healthy, but had an extra finger on his left hand that required surgery to remove. At the hearing, Tommy cried as he claimed that he was defending himself against an aggressive Sheila. He said that she attacked him when she found out about Lois's pregnancy. He also said that Lois often expressed a desire to escape her difficult mother. Lois' testimony contradicted Tommy's. She said she never wanted her mother to die. During the violent fight, she even ran into the bathroom to save her mother. But her testimony was not believed. The judge was presented with evidence that showed Lois and Tommy's criminal intent. Lois had previously suggested that Tommy hire a hitman to kill Sheila and had prepared $40,000 for the purpose. Sheila's autopsy showed obvious injuries and bruises on her hands and face, indicating that Sheila had fought back in self-defense. As a result, Lois Heather Mack and Tommy Schaefer were convicted of premeditated murder. Under Indonesian law, they faced the death penalty. However, the court pardoned them. This leniency was largely due to their newborn child and the couple's deep remorse. Tommy realized the severity of his actions. Sheila's family later visited him in prison, talked to him, and expressed their grief. This interaction caused Tommy to fall into a depression. He began to hate himself and truly regret his choices. His mental state deteriorated, leading to health problems, causing him to lose 11 kilograms and look pale. In April 2015, the final court hearing concluded, and the judge announced the verdict. Lois Heather Mack was sentenced to 10 years in prison, while Tommy Schaefer received an 18-year term. The prosecution described them as ruthless criminals. However, Tommy's good behavior and expressed remorse helped him avoid a longer sentence. As they left the courtroom, Lois posed for photographers from various newspapers and, while drinking a soda that smelled of alcohol, smiled and made jokes. The only thing that troubled her was the fact that she would be released much earlier than Tommy. Meanwhile, Tommy looked at her with anger and wanted nothing to do with her, marking the end of their relationship. Lois, who avoided the death penalty and received a shorter sentence, acted provocatively in prison. She frequently took photos and videos with her friends in prison, enjoying their time together. She managed to get alcohol to drink. To earn money to buy alcohol, she sold food in the prison yard. The prison authorities allowed her to sell food, feeling sorry for her because she was a single mother, but they saw that she did not care much for her daughter, who spent her early years in terrible conditions. Tommy considered Lois a fallen person and mentally ill. One day, reporters secretly entered the prison and recorded footage of Lois having fun and dancing with friends in her cell. The footage quickly went viral on television and online, causing considerable public outrage. In response, Tommy filed a petition with the United States government, requesting that Lois be transferred from the Indonesian prison to a psychiatric hospital in the United States. In the petition, he expressed that he was not seeking sympathy but hoped that their daughter would grow up to be a good person. A year later, Tommy wrote a letter to his friends detailing how Sheila's murder was planned and carried out, and Lois's questionable actions in front of their young daughter Stella. Lois seemed to be focused only on her own gain, with no regard for Stella. The responsibility of looking after Lois' daughter Stella was eventually given to a fellow prisoner, Ashar Puta Melody Sert, who had been released. Ashar quickly adapted to life in Indonesia and married a wealthy local man. Stella was then placed in the care of the couple. The police identified Robert's involvement in Sheila's murder, leading to his quick arrest and trial in 2017. He pleaded guilty to breaking the law and being an accessory to Sheila's murder. During the trial, he revealed that in August 2014, Tommy had come to him for advice on how to carry out a murder. As a result, Robert received a 9-year prison sentence. Sheila's family was pleased with the outcome. While in prison, Lois ended her relationship with Tommy. In October 2021, Lois completed 7 years in an Indonesian prison and was paroled. Her reunion with her 6-year-old daughter, Stella, was a moment of liberation for her. Stella lived in Indonesia for another month before being extradited to the United States with her mother. At that point, her daughter no longer needed a guardian. Upon arriving in Chicago, Lois was arrested at the airport by FBI agents. She faced new charges of conspiracy to murder a U.S. citizen abroad and obstruction of justice. Lois attempted to draw media attention to her arrest, believing it was unfair, especially since she had already served time in Indonesia. She felt it was unfair that the police had brought new charges against her. At her first court appearance in the United States, Lois denied all charges against her. Her attorney, Keith Vogel-Barova, argued for her to be released on bail. In response, District Judge Charnell agreed to consider the appeal and heard from Assistant District Attorney Terry Keeney. The court needed a reasonable amount of time to make a decision. A week later, Lois reached a plea deal with police and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to murder a U.S. citizen abroad. A hearing then took place in Illinois federal court. District Judge Matthew Kelly considered the prosecution's recommendation for a 28-year prison sentence, minus 7 years for time served in Indonesia. The judge then sentenced Lois Heather Mack to 26 years in prison, ordered her to pay $2,278 in restitution, and fined her $50,000. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Mark Despain. On Wednesday afternoon, August 24, 2011, 33-year-old Michelle Despain left work to collect some urgent documents from home. She arrived back from the bank around 3 p.m. and noticed the back door was unlocked, which alarmed her. Upon entering, she found the house completely ransacked. Drawers were open, items were scattered everywhere, there was broken glass on the floor, some clothes were tossed in the bathtub, and a jewelry box was open in the bedroom. Then she made a horrifying discovery. Her husband Mark was lying unconscious on the kitchen floor. He had been shot and was bleeding. Frightened, Michelle screamed and ran outside. She called 911 and told them that robbers had broken into the house and shot her husband. The police then arrived at the scene of the crime. When the police and ambulance arrived, they found the house in complete chaos. At first, it appeared that a robbery had taken place. Doctors later confirmed that Mark had been dead in the kitchen. The medical examiner stated that Mark had been dead about an hour before the police arrived. He had 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest and one to the head. Burns to his skin indicated that he had been shot at close range. After a careful examination, the police suspected that the crime scene was staged. They discovered that on the day of the incident, Mark was at home, then had lunch with Michelle at a cafe. After lunch, they had ice cream and took some dessert home. Michelle then went back to work, while Mark returned home. The police questioned why the robbers executed Mark at close range, suspecting that this was a planned attack rather than a spontaneous act of violence during a robbery. The police started gathering detailed information about Mark Despain and his family. Mark began dating Michelle when she was 18 and he was 19, though they had known each other since school. Michelle had a young daughter from a previous relationship. Soon, they decided to live together, and Mark's parents bought them a trailer. Mark treated Michelle's daughter as his own and worked in the family business as an investor and real estate appraiser. As Mark's career advanced, he founded his own company and earned a substantial income. The couple moved from a trailer to a large, beautiful house with a swimming pool in a prestigious area of Jonesboro, Arkansas, USA. Michelle and Mark had 2 more children together, and their family of 5 appeared friendly, wealthy, and happy. They vacationed at expensive resorts several times a year, including trips to Mexico and Disneyland. Initially, Michelle was a housewife but later began helping Mark with his business and worked at a local bank. Despite Mark offering for her to stay home, she wanted to pursue her career. After Mark's suspicious death, Michelle became the prime suspect in the case. She was summoned to the police station for questioning. Michelle claimed that she had a solid alibi, as she was at work that day and only went home for work-related reasons, where she accidentally discovered her husband's body. Her alibi was confirmed by surveillance camera footage showing her returning to work after lunch at the time her husband was murdered. As a result, suspicions against Michelle were dismissed. The police interviewed neighbors, who mentioned seeing a suspicious black man driving an old blue Mercedes in the area on the day of the crime. Police considered whether Mark had any enemies or people who might have wanted to harm him. Some family acquaintances described Mark as a powerful and ambitious man who could have made enemies. A work check revealed that he was scheduled to work that day but suddenly decided to go hunting and stay home. Police spoke with Michelle again to clarify the timeline of events and possibly uncover new details they may have missed before. Michelle told police that she met Mark for lunch that day. They went to a coffee shop near the bank where she worked. After lunch, Michelle returned to work at 1:30 p.m. and returned home again after 2:30 p.m., where she found Mark murdered. This time, however, Michelle revealed new details. She said that when she saw Mark lying on the floor in a pool of blood, she approached him to check if he was still alive. Michelle shook Mark's leg and called his name, but he didn't respond, so she assumed he was dead. Michelle ran out of the house and called 911, then waited for the police to arrive. She called her mother, explained what had happened and asked her to come. When her mother arrived, Michelle was near her house, and the police and ambulance were already on the scene. The police asked Michelle if she knew anyone who might want to harm her husband. To everyone's surprise, she confidently named Mark's father, Jack. Michelle explained her reasons for suspecting him. Initially, when she and Mark got together, his parents seemed like good people. They even bought them a trailer to start their life and supported Mark in his work at his father's company for several years. However, after Mark became a successful employee, he wanted more responsibility and asked his father for a larger share of the company. His father refused, leading to a fallout between them. Mark then decided to leave and start his own company. Jack was upset about this, and since then, they hadn't communicated. Michelle realized that Jack was cruel and cold-hearted after getting to know her husband's parents better. Jack immediately disliked her daughter from a previous marriage, and a serious feud erupted between him and the 13-year-old. Jack also showed hostility towards Michelle herself, leading her to suspect he might harm Mark out of spite. Michelle's father shared her concerns, having encountered Mark's father while working for him and believing Jack capable of murder. He even heard Jack threaten his own son with violence, and they had a strained relationship due to a business dispute. The police took note of this information and began investigating the relationship between Mark and his father. They discovered that Mark and Jack had argued over money and the company years ago, leading to a strained relationship. However, it was unclear why the father suddenly decided to kill his son at this time. The police spoke to Mark's parents. The father confirmed the argument but mentioned that the money dispute started because of Michelle's influence. According to them, Michelle always wanted more and was never satisfied with their financial situation. Even though Mark made a lot of money, she insisted that he ask his father to transfer most of the company to him. During their arguments, it was clear that Michelle was to blame for everything. Jack said that they kept in touch with their son despite their arguments, but ignored Michelle. Shortly before the tragedy, Mark revealed his intention to divorce his wife. That day, Mark called Jack, asking him to stop by the house to buy hunting supplies. The father noted that only Michelle knew he would be home that day. Mark's mother mentioned that Michelle feared divorce because it would mean losing the finances and status she had enjoyed from Mark. Her parents advised the police to investigate Michelle's actions on the day of the murder further, suggesting that she may be more complex than she appears. The father suspected that she was involved in the case, perhaps not as a killer but as an organizer. Jack reported an incident that Michelle had mentioned to the police, involving a conflict with Michelle's daughter, Brooke. Jack discovered that Brooke was having a romantic relationship with her boyfriend and found several revealing photos on her phone. Jack warned her to end the relationship and stop taking such photos, and threatened to tell her parents. In retaliation, Brooke used Jack's phone to take topless selfies and sent them to her boyfriend, then told her mother that Jack had been harassing her and taking inappropriate photos. Michelle was furious when she found the photos on Jack's phone and accused him of taking them. Jack denied the accusations, and Michelle fought back, leading to a fight. After the incident, Jack's wife left him and filed for divorce, suspecting him of child molestation. Michelle reported Jack to the police, but the investigation revealed that Jack was not involved. It was confirmed that the photos were taken by Brooke herself. No charges were filed against him, and Jack's wife returned after the truth was revealed. However, the experience left a lasting negative impact on their relationship, damaging Jack's reputation and health. They decided to cut ties with Michelle and her daughter, allowing her to raise Brooke as she wished. Brooke later admitted that her mother had convinced her to take the photos to damage Jack's reputation and alienate Mark from his father, and their plan almost succeeded. Jack and his wife were not considered suspects because they had a solid alibi. They were on vacation in another city on the day of the murder. Based on a tip from Mark's father, the police turned their attention to Michelle. They wanted to understand why Michelle would kill her husband and what her motive might be. Michelle and Mark had shared 15 happy years together, raising 2 children and building a successful business. They lived a comfortable life without any financial worries. So why would Michelle kill her husband and risk losing the family's main source of income? Police quickly uncovered that Michelle was not the grieving widow she appeared to be. In reality, she was having an affair with a younger colleague, who was 24 years old, a few months before Mark's death. She fully supported him financially, covering his apartment, groceries, and all bills with the money her husband earned. The police also learned that Mark had significant debt totaling about $2 million, despite his substantial wealth. Michelle was found to be taking money from her husband's business account, and it was discovered that Mark had 2 life insurance policies totaling $1 million. This new evidence further raised suspicions about Michelle, leading police to call her in for questioning. Police questioned Michelle about an affair with another man. She admitted to having a new romantic interest in a young man but insisted her husband was unaware of the affair. Michelle explained that their marriage had been troubled for a long time and they were discussing divorce. She planned to move out soon but denied any involvement in her husband's murder. Michelle argued that she had no motive to kill him, as he was a loving father and will pay a large alimony. Despite their suspicions, the police lacked concrete evidence against Michelle. Surveillance camera footage from the bank where Michelle worked confirmed her presence at work during the murder. The investigation hit a dead end. The case took a dramatic turn when police received information from a person who reported that someone was bragging about killing Mark Despain. The person was identified as Terrence Barker. Police investigated and discovered that Terrence's phone had been near Mark's home at the time of the murder. They also learned that a friend of Terrence owned an old blue Mercedes. When Mark's neighbors, who had seen the African American in the Mercedes, were shown Terrence's photo, they identified him. Police located Terrence and brought him in for questioning. Although Terrence initially denied any involvement, Terrence eventually confessed to shooting Mark. He revealed that a client had promised to pay him $10,000 for the murder, which was why he accepted the job. However, he refused to reveal the client's identity and claimed that he had not yet been paid for the murder. Terrence was arrested and charged with murder. Police found and questioned Johnny Hubbard, the driver of the blue Mercedes and Mark's friend. Police hoped Johnny would cooperate with the police and share information. Johnny was one of Mark's tenants and knew Michelle's father, Carl Kelly. Johnny agreed to assist the police and reveal everything. He explained that Carl had approached him about Mark's murder and would pay him money. Terrence knows about this plan and also wants to join to make money. They met Carl in a parking lot near the church to plan the crime. Their plan was for Terrence to shoot Mark. Even though Terrence did not know Mark, he agreed to join in for the money. As a result, Johnny was arrested and charged with murder. When Terrence found out about Johnny's testimony against him, he decided to reveal everything as well. He confirmed his friend's account and added that Carl gave him a gun near the church, which he used to shoot Mark. Carl showed them Mark's house and said they needed to wait for his command to carry out the murder. On the day of the crime, Terrence also revealed that not only was Carl involved, but his daughter Michelle was too. Michelle was the mastermind behind the operation, giving her father instructions over the phone. Her father helped her with everything and covered for her. Police reviewed the messages between Michelle and her father and discovered a text that exposed her involvement. At 8:20 a.m. on the day of the murder, she texted her father, "I can't live like this, it's been a terrible morning." Her father replied, "Okay, you can take him out to lunch." The police believed that Michelle had arranged to meet Mark for lunch that day, which gave her father the chance to take Terrence into the house, hide there, and wait for Mark to return home so he could shoot him. Carl's phone records showed that he was present at the crime scene during the murder and played a role in the planning. An analysis of Michelle's communications with her husband on the day of the murder showed that she invited Mark to lunch. He initially refused because he was planning to go hunting, but she insisted and asked her husband to meet, and he eventually agreed. Throughout their lunch, Michelle kept in touch with her father via text message, informing Carl when they had finished eating and when Mark was on his way home. Michelle and her father were arrested. Michelle initially denied any involvement, but eventually confessed and claimed that her father was solely responsible for the crime. She said that her father had planned the crime, motivated by insurance money and a desire to take over the family business. However, the police were skeptical of her claim because she had sent her father a text message that morning urging them to kill. Carl eventually admitted his role in the crime. Michelle and her father, Carl Kelly, were charged with first-degree murder of Mark. The 4 people arrested in the case later agreed to plead guilty to the prosecution, which reduced their sentences but also prevented them from appealing the court's decision in the future. Mark's parents accepted the deal because they wanted to avoid a lengthy trial. Terrence Barker and Carl Kelly received sentences of 35 years each, Johnny Hubbard was sentenced to 18 years, and Michelle Despain received 30 years. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Julian Niswinder. Julian Niswinder was born in 1989 in the small town of Monroe, which has a population of 20,000. She has a twin sister named Jennifer. The girls were raised by their grandparents while their mother was building her personal life. Kim had given birth to them at 15, claiming she was raped at 14 by a guy she barely knew. However, relatives say he was someone familiar and close to the family. Regardless, he avoided taking responsibility. After discovering her pregnancy, Kim decided she wasn't ready to be a mother and entrusted her daughters to her parents. The grandparents became their official guardians and raised them as their own children. When the children grew up, their mother remarried Jim, who worked in the cleaning business, and they had another daughter. By then, Jennifer was already attending school and living with her mother. while Julia spent a lot of time with her grandparents on her mother's side. In high school, things changed. According to her mother, Julia became defiant and uncontrollable, often arguing with her twin sister, Jennifer. Eventually, their mother grew tired of the constant fights between the daughters. Their house was small, with only 2 bedrooms and a living room, so she couldn't give the older daughters separate rooms. As a result, she decided to send Julia to live with her grandparents again. Julia was happy to return to grandparents. She lived there for a while, and her grandparents indulged her and were very affectionate toward her. At that time, Julia became very concerned about her appearance and tried to lose weight. She followed strict diets, restricted herself in almost everything, and ate very little. Her grandma was worried about her, but Julia assured her that she was fine. At 19 years old, Julia needed to make her own life decisions. She enrolled at Eastern Michigan University in the journalism faculty and continued living with her grandmother. Julia dreamed of becoming a TV presenter. She became close to Jennifer and her mother but did not want to return home. The 2 sisters became closer, sharing secrets, experiences and events in their lives. Julia later moved to a room on the campus of a university in the small town of Salanta, Michigan. She was fortunate to get a room with a bathroom. Julia also got a job with her mother at Walmart. Her new place was a 45-minute drive from her mother's house. Her neighbors were girls she got along with well. On Thursday, December 6, 2012, with Christmas and the holidays approaching, Julia's neighbors left for the weekend to visit their families. Julia visited her mother's family. They had already set up a Christmas tree and began decorating it and the house together. They all enjoyed hot chocolate and listened to Christmas songs, creating a festive atmosphere and having a wonderful time together. On Friday, December 7th, she visited her mother's workplace and they went shopping for presents together. Julia and her mother then went home together, and an argument broke out that turned into a fight. The exact details of the incident remain unclear. Julia left the house in distress, drove to her grandmother's house, and expressed that she never wanted to return to that house again. Her grandmother comforted her, invited her to stay, and together they decorated the Christmas tree and the house. Julia's mother later visited her grandparents and reassured Julia that she had misunderstood the situation. Julia's grandmother listened to both sides and sensed that something was wrong. When her mother left, Julia stayed with her grandmother. The next day, December 8th, Julia went to work. She saw her mother there but did not speak to her. As they passed each other, Julia's mother told her that she loved her. After her shift, Julia went home. During her lunch break, she met her sister Jennifer at a coffee shop and mentioned her plans for the evening, saying that she was going to meet a guy after work. But she kept the details a secret. Julia was very private about her personal life, so it was not surprising that Julia kept the information secret with Jennifer. After meeting with Jennifer, she rushed to the car without putting on her coat, despite the cold weather. The last time Jennifer spoke to Julia was around 11 p.m. when Julia returned home from her date. Their conversation was brief. Julia simply said, "I'm home," before hanging up. Julia was very tired and she needed to study for an exam the next day, December 9th. After working at Walmart, she went shopping and then returned home. That night, she ran into a neighbor returned from visiting her family. The neighbor was getting ready to sleep at her boyfriend's house. Julia closed the bedroom door and was about to go to sleep. While the neighbor was getting ready, she heard the TV playing loudly in Julia's room. This made her feel strange because she had never seen Julia watching TV before, especially when it was time to go to bed. However, the neighbor was in a hurry to meet her boyfriend, so she didn't investigate further and left the house. On Monday morning, December 10th, 2012, a neighbor returned from a family visit. She quickly showered to go to school. While getting ready, she noticed that Julia's alarm clock kept ringing, but no one seemed to have turned it off. Knowing that Julia often struggled to wake up in the morning, the neighbor was not surprised. She knocked on Julia's door to try to wake her up, but received no response. After a while, she decided not to bother her anymore and went to school. That day, Julia did not go to class and also missed an important exam, which was unusual for her, as she had never been absent or late for an exam before. Julia missed her shift at her stepfather's cleaning company, where she had taken a part-time job to earn money before the holidays. Although she was scheduled to work, she did not show up. She also missed her shift at Walmart that evening, which raised concerns among her coworkers. The next day, December 11th, Julia missed her shift for the second time. Her coworkers grew increasingly concerned and tried to reach her by phone, but no one answered. An employee had Julia's mother's phone number and called her that evening to inform her that Julia had missed 2 shifts. Julia's mother, Kim, was at a cafe playing darts with Jennifer and other relatives at the time. She noted that their schedules often didn't align, and it was common for them to go 2 or 3 days without seeing or calling each other. When Kim learned that Julia was missing and not responding to calls, she panicked and tried to reach her daughter repeatedly, but all her calls went to voicemail. Concerned, Kim called Julia's friend Rachel and asked her to check on Julia. Rachel agreed and went to Julia's house around 9 p.m. Rachel found Julia's car parked in the driveway next to the house, but no one answered the door or the phone. Concerned, Rachel sought out a security guard for assistance. She asked the guard to open Julia's room to check, but he refused and instead called the police. The guard could not find a spare key to Julia's room. When the police arrived, they broke down the door and entered the apartment. Inside the bedroom, everything was in disarray, furniture was scattered on the floor. And Julia's handbag was on the bed, making it look like a robbery had taken place. As the police continued their search of the apartment, they made a dreadful discovery. They found the body of Julia face down in the bathtub. Her body was fully submerged, and her hands were behind her back with her feet together. There were signs of restraint on her wrists and ankles. A phone was also found underwater beneath her body. Julia's torn clothes were on the bathroom floor, and it was evident that the fabric had been cut with a knife. After examining her, the police concluded that her body had likely been in the water for 2 days and was in a state of advanced decomposition. The knife and rope used to tie up Julia were not found anywhere in the apartment. All of Julia's valuables, including her wallet with cash, laptop, and car keys, were still on the table, and the wrapped Christmas presents were untouched. The only items missing were the pillowcase and the keys to Julia's room, which led investigators to rule out the possibility of a robbery. Rachel learned the tragic news from the police and immediately informed Julia's mother about her daughter's death. Kim and Jennifer quickly got into their car and drove to Julia's apartment. Despite the police cordon, the mother and sister approached the building to find out what had happened. They tried to enter the room but were stopped by the police. The family demanded answers about Julia, but no one would give them any information. They were distraught and pressed the police for information, but the police only confirmed that Julia was dead. Police took Julia's family to the station along with her neighbors for questioning. Julia's neighbors said they generally got along with her, although they had had a conflict in the past. They had resolved their differences and had not had any problems since. The neighbors said they were not home when the murder occurred and provided a confirmed alibi, clearing them of any suspicion. Forensic experts examined the crime scene and found no signs of forced entry. All windows and doors were locked. Julia's room was on the first floor, leading police to speculate that she may have opened the door herself and that the attacker was likely someone she knew. At the crime scene, police discovered bloody rubber gloves, male biological fluids, and 3 DNA samples on the gloves. The evidence was analyzed, revealing that one DNA sample belonged to Julia, while the other two came from an unidentified male. One of the samples was too decomposed to be identifiable, and there was no record of the second male DNA sample in the police database. Notably, the biological fluids belonged to a man who had had a vasectomy, suggesting that he was not a father. This led police to conclude that the suspect was likely an older man rather than a younger one, as vasectomies are not typically performed at a young age. As a result, police focused their search on adult men who knew Julia. An autopsy revealed that Julia died from strangulation. She had been strangled before being thrown into the water. The potential suspect had turned up the volume on the television on the day of the crime to drown out any screams she may have made during the struggle. A toxicology report confirmed that there were no traces of alcohol or illegal drugs in her system. While the police continued their investigation, Julia's family decided to conduct their own investigation to find out the truth. They posted leaflets and appealed to the public for help through the media and social networks. But these efforts did not help their investigation. Police discovered that the girl had been dating a young man shortly before the murder. Police checked Julia's phone and identified the man, taking him in for questioning. However, he was soon released, as he had a solid alibi that cleared him of suspicion. Police found Julia's stepfather, Jim, suspicious, as he appeared unusually calm and did not seem to be grieving over Julia's death. He was familiar with her house and could have easily gained access to the apartment, as Julia may have let him in herself. People who knew him described him as strange, reclusive, and unsociable. Everyone kept their distance from Jim, especially after Jim had a vasectomy following the birth of his daughter with Kim. This made him the primary suspect in the investigation. When Julia's mother, Kim, and her sister Jennifer found out about the suspicions surrounding Jim, they strongly defended him, believing he was innocent. Kim argued that she had trouble sleeping at night and frequently got up to use the bathroom due to health issues. She insisted that she would have noticed if Jim had left the bed that night, but he stayed with her the entire time. Kim rejected all allegations against Jim, explaining that she had previously been a victim of violence. She stated that if she had sensed any danger from Jim, she would never have allowed him near her daughters. Julia's grandparents were very concerned about her and decided to speak up. They informed the police about a fight that occurred at Julia's parents' house a few days before the tragedy. Although Julia didn't provide details about the conflict, she did say she would never return to that house. This raised questions about whether she had discovered something troubling or if there was another reason that led Jim to want to eliminate her. The grandparents noted that Kim and Jim's marriage was on the brink of divorce, as they frequently argued, and Kim had expressed that Jim might leave her. They hadn't shared a bedroom for a long time, making it difficult for Kim to know if Jim was home that night. This could explain Kim's intense protectiveness of her husband. She might have been trying to save their marriage or covering for him. In the early days after the incident, the police prevented Julia's mother and stepfather from entering her room where the crime took place, as they were collecting evidence and information. Despite this, Kim and Jim attempted to gain access to the room and were eventually successful, although Kim later said she did not remember how they got in. The police were surprised because they had not been granted permission to enter the room. Once inside, her parents immediately began unpacking and cleaning the room. First, they dumped a large bag of trash in the bathroom. After the cleanup, much of the original crime scene became untraceable. Additionally, Julia's car, which she had saved up to buy and was still paying for, was quickly sold by her parents, on the grounds that they could no longer afford the loan. This raised significant suspicions. The FBI eventually got involved. Forensic experts concluded that Jim was the prime suspect. Julia's maternal grandfather, James, noticed that Jim had a very strict parenting style, often making her cry and cornering her. James suspected that Jim might be punishing his daughter harshly behind closed doors. It was also revealed that Jim had been a karate instructor and the children had reported their mother for his brutal treatment. Jim had trained his daughter rigorously, helping her achieve a black belt in karate. The police asked Jim to provide a DNA sample, which he readily provided to clear his name. However, his DNA did not match that of the second man found on the glove. As time passed, the investigation stalled, and the case seemed to have been forgotten by everyone except the grandparents. They regularly asked the police for any updates and expressed their frustration at the lack of progress. Julia's grandparents still believed that the police should thoroughly investigate Jim, her stepfather. James suspected that Jim may have taken latex gloves from a cleaner at work to frame someone else while concealing his own involvement. However, this theory was never pursued further. It left many unanswered questions, such as whose DNA was on the damaged glove. It raised the possibility that there could have been two criminals involved. They asked Jim to take a lie detector test, which he passed twice, but Julia's grandfather remained skeptical. He still believed that Jim was somehow involved in Julia's murder. James' persistent attempts to communicate with the police about the investigation led them to stop contacting him. This decision upset only Julia's mother. Living in Florida, James was unable to visit the police in person, which resulted in him losing access to important information and feeling powerless. His daughter Kim and granddaughters, Jennifer and Madison, wrote to James to say he was no longer part of their family, which hurt him deeply. One of Julia's friends informed the police that Julia had reported harassment from her stepfather, who referred to Julia as his girlfriend, causing her fear. This suggested a possible sexual motive for the murder, prompting the police to seek a search warrant for Jim's home. During the search of his laptop, they discovered numerous explicit photos of minors. Jim was arrested due to these photos. At first, he claimed he was innocent, insisting that he did not know where the photos came from and that he was being framed. Later, he conceded that the photos might belong to him but insisted he was unaware that the subjects were minors. He maintained his innocence and was found not guilty because the prosecution failed to prove that the photos showed minors. Later, Julia's friend withdrew her accusations against her stepfather, although police informed her that her previous statements had been recorded. James discovered that Kim and Jennifer spoke to this friend and likely pressured her to change her testimony. Despite everything, Kim continues to support her husband and believes in his innocence. She thinks that her neighbor is responsible for her daughter's death due to a disagreement. However, this theory is not taken seriously because the neighbor has an alibi and only male DNA was found at the crime scene. 3 years after Julia's murder, in 2015, Kim and Jim's attorney advised them not to give a written statement because it could be used against them in court. James was even more angry when he heard this. He felt that if they had nothing to hide, they would not have hired an attorney or refused to give a written statement, because giving false testimony could have legal consequences. By insisting on giving a statement, they avoided potential liability. It was later discovered that the police had overlooked a crucial piece of evidence. It was the bathtub rug that might contain the criminal's DNA. This information emerged when new police took over the case. They reviewed all the documents and paid special attention to this rug. However, the police could not find it. Julia's mother allowed them to search among Julia's belongings, which she had taken from Julia's room and stored in a storage room, but the rug was not among them. Its disappearance is a mystery. Only Julia's family had access to the storage facility. Julia's grandfather suspected that her mother and stepfather had thrown the rug away while cleaning the bathroom, along with the trash. The stepfather's mother and Julia's twin sister both insist that there was no argument in their home a few days before Julia's murder. They described the gathering as warm and friendly, with no disagreements. The James is determined to seek justice for Julia. He has thoroughly researched DNA and discovered that technology has made significant advancements in the past decade, allowing for the analysis of damaged or weak DNA samples. He is puzzled by the police's disregard for his requests and suggestions, as they appear reluctant to pursue the case. Julia's mother, Kim, has divorced Jim, but they remain on good terms and maintain communication. She continues to support Jim's innocence and views him as the decent person. As a result, there have been no arrests in the case, and the perpetrator remains unpunished. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Blagg family. Jennifer Blagg was born on January 8, 1967, in Oklahoma, USA. She grew up with her mother and one brother, and they were very close from a young age. Jennifer was creative, sociable, and enjoyed playing the piano and dancing. However, she faced a traumatic experience in childhood when, at the age of 12, she was raped by a family friend who was much older than her. This incident deeply affected her, and it took a long time for her to heal. Despite this, she eventually overcame her feelings of resentment, pain, and anger, graduated from high school, and went on to attend college. Her future husband, Michael, was born into a military family. They frequently moved due to his father's career as a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. Growing up in such an environment was challenging, but Michael was a calm and obedient child. Michael was hardworking and intelligent. He even participated in a program sponsored by the governor to study nuclear physics, for which he received an honorary diploma. He continued to pursue his studies in science thereafter. Michael achieved everything by his own labor, because nothing in life came to him easily. He later shared that during this time, he worked as a pizza delivery driver to cover his college expenses. At 21, he married his first wife, but after about a year of constant issues in their relationship, they decided to get a divorce. In 2008, Jennifer enrolled at San Diego State University to pursue a business degree. Meanwhile, Michael chose to follow his father's path and joined the Navy, where he became a decorated Gulf War veteran and helicopter pilot. After returning from a business trip, he had some free time to explore the city. He attended a party with mutual friends, where he met Jennifer. They feel an attraction to each other, and Michael asked her out on a date, which she accepted. They went to the movies and afterward decided to start dating. In 1991, Michael and Jennifer got married and moved to the quiet town of Simpsonville in Southern California. They enjoyed the peaceful atmosphere and made many friends through their church. As a deeply religious couple, they seemed well prepared to start a family, even though Michael was often away serving in the Navy. 4 years later, they welcomed a daughter named Abby. After her birth, Michael left the military and secured a high-paying engineering job with a flexible schedule, allowing him to spend more time with his family. In his spare time, Michael began teaching Sunday school, which he considered important. However, due to Michael's job, they had to move several times, which was challenging for Jennifer. She often felt like just as she was settling into a new city and making new friends, her family had to move again. Despite her struggles, but when Michael proposed moving, Jennifer easily accepted because of her religious beliefs. Their final move occurred in 2001, when they decided to settle in Grand Junction, Colorado. It was a small, cozy town known as a winter resort, surrounded by mountains that attracted wealthy tourists. In Grand Junction, Michael took on an important role as an engineer for a company in that city. He also began teaching at the local Sunday school affiliated with the church. The family was very religious, and friends mentioned that they prayed about nearly every decision they made together. By 2001, Abby was 6 years old. She was getting ready for school and attended preparatory courses at a Christian school, where her mother, Jennifer, worked as a teacher's assistant. Abby was kind and helpful, assisting her parents with various household chores. She is also very religious, like her father and mother. On November 1, 2001, Michael called 911. The police were called and, upon arrival, they met Michael. According to Michael, he had just returned home from work and was immediately concerned when he saw the open door, because his family is always closed. As he entered the house, he didn't see anyone inside. In the bedroom, he discovered blood on bed, which dripped onto the floor. He also noticed that his wife's jewelry box was empty and that her handbag was on the floor, scattered with other belongings. Despite searching the entire house, he could not find his wife or daughter. Michael believed they were still alive and thought they might have been kidnapped, so he called for help. Based on the large amount of blood found, the police suspected that it was unlikely Jennifer and Abby were alive. They feared both may have been murdered. Since the Colorado River was nearby, the authorities considered the possibility that the bodies could have been disposed of in the river. They thoroughly searched the area, but found no signs of Jennifer and Abby. As the search operation expanded, volunteers and search teams joined forces to scour the surrounding region for any evidence related to Jennifer and Abby. Additionally, relatives of Jennifer traveled to the city to help with the search. While the search was ongoing, forensic experts examined the Blagg family home and collected various documents for analysis. They discovered significant amounts of blood on the bed and several fingerprints, which were sent to the lab for testing. Detectives also interviewed neighbors to piece together the timeline of incident from that day, but the neighbors did not see Jennifer and Abby. Michael was at work during the attack, a fact supported by CCTV footage and his colleagues' testimonies. He stated that he saw Jennifer and Abby alive early that morning, indicating that the attack likely occurred before he returned home from work. However, Michael was not excluded from the suspect list, as close family members are often scrutinized in such cases. However, it was crucial to verify the details carefully. The police interviewed Michael at the station, where he provided a thorough account of the incident from the previous day. He mentioned that around 7 p.m., Jennifer received a call from a friend who invited her to meet the following evening. After that, they watched TV and prepared for bed. By around 10 p.m., the entire family had gone to their rooms. Michael noted that early in the morning, when he woke up for work, Jennifer and Abby were still asleep. They were scheduled to get up around 6:30 to allow him to take Abby to her preparatory classes at school. After that, Jennifer returned home to take care of her daily tasks. Her husband Michael usually called her several times a day, but on that day, she didn't answer his calls. Assuming she might be busy, Michael didn't immediately worry. He then called her friend, assuming they decided to meet during the day, but the friend didn't know her whereabouts. Michael then continued with his day. He assumed she was at home, doing the laundry, cleaning, and cooking dinner. As soon as Michael returned home from work, he sensed that something was terribly wrong. There are two things that make him feel unusual. His daughter, Abby, didn't greet him as she usually did, and there was no smell of dinner cooking, which was unexpected since his wife Jennifer had planned to cook before meeting her friend. The scene became even more ominous when he spotted blood and immediately dialed the police. To preserve the crime scene, Michael went outside and waited for the police to arrive. The detectives then took over the investigation, and their inquiries led them to Abby's school. They discovered that she hadn't attended classes that day, which didn't surprise her teachers. Apparently, someone had called the class teacher the day before, claiming to be Abby's father and informing the school that she would be absent. The teacher wasn't suspicious at the time, but they did recall that a man, claiming to be Michael, had made the call. However, when questioned, Michael denied making the call, which only increased the suspicions about him. Further investigations revealed that Jennifer's friend from church, Melson, had noticed trouble in the Blagg family's relationship. Melson reported that Jennifer appeared to be extremely afraid of Michael. Jennifer only felt comfortable meeting in secret when Michael was not around. Jennifer had likely been forbidden by Michael from having visitors at their home. On one occasion, When Melson visited their house at length, Jennifer became anxious and hastily asked her to leave, probably to avoid Michael finding out that her had been to their house. The day before Jennifer's disappearance, Melson contacted Jennifer to invite her and Abby to visit. Notably, she specified that Michael, her husband, would not accompany them, which was unusual since the family typically traveled together. Melson agreed but thought the arrangement was peculiar. It was clear that Jennifer had recently argued with Michael and wanted space from him. Despite the plans, Jennifer never showed up the following morning. Later, investigators discovered voice messages from Michael to Jennifer, in which he sent her well wishes and affectionate greetings. However, authorities suspect that these messages may have been part of a setup, as it's possible that both Jennifer and Abby were already dead when the messages were sent. This thing raised suspicion about Michael's involvement, but he insisted on his innocence. He even gave interviews to journalists, expressing frustration that the police were focusing on him, and even they overlooking other suspects. Michael said he was deeply concerned about his wife and daughter's whereabouts and felt the real perpetrator was still at large. He has offered a $3,000 reward for any information that could help speed up the investigation. The detectives remained suspicious of Michael's behavior, so they decided to monitor him closely. During their investigation, they discovered blood on the bed, but strangely, very little was found on the surrounding walls. Normally, blood splatters and scatters in various directions, but in this case, that wasn't the case. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the bed belonged to Jennifer. Additionally, when the detectives applied luminol to the family van, they found several hidden blood stains on the door and inside the vehicle, suggesting that it had been used to transport the victims, Abby and Jennifer. Michael reported to work on the day his wife and daughter disappeared. An investigation of the house revealed 55 fingerprints, many of which belonged to Michael. Notably, 17 fingerprints were unidentified, and 6 of those were small to potentially belong to young daughter, Abby. Despite this, Michael claimed that he had seen nothing unusual and pointed out that it was normal for family members' fingerprints to be present in the home. As the investigation continued, Michael relocated to a different house and didn't return to the original one, even after restrictions were lifted. He chose not to clean and no return to the house, stating that it was too painful for him. However, this decision ultimately worked in the police's favor as they were able to periodically examine the crime scene. In interviews with journalists, Michael portrayed the disappearance as resembling a robbery, citing the missing jewelry and money from the house. He also mentioned that there had been a string of burglaries in the area over the past year, suggesting that his family had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to Michael, the thieves may have broken in while his family was asleep, inadvertently targeting them. He suspected that the robbers were provoked by something when they entered his house. Even so, he held on to the hope that his wife and daughter were still alive. He often referenced Bible verses when communicating with the media, maintaining his innocence when questioned by the media and the police. However, detectives were convinced that the incident was not a robbery, as they found no signs of forced entry. They believed that the stolen items in the house were just a setup to distract the investigation. The police noted that robbers typically target empty homes to avoid confrontations and complications. If they encountered occupants, they wouldn't waste time and energy brutally killing them. Instead, they would opt for a quicker method. In the Blagg family home, a diary belonging to Jennifer was discovered. In it, she wrote about having a severe argument with Michael the day before her disappearance and fearing that he might harm her. Although she didn't elaborate on the details, she framed the situation in biblical terms. The detectives were unclear about the argument and approached Michael for clarification, but he maintained he had no memory of it. However, the police discovered a note addressed to him, apologizing for allowing negativity to creep back into their lives, suggesting relationship problems. When examining the Blagg family computer, the police were surprised to find thousands of hardcore pornography images. However, Michael denied any involvement in the images, he claiming that his wife was trying to spice up their lives. A further investigation showed that Michael and Jennifer's relationship had been troubled for a while. Michael had initially hired an escort out of curiosity, but over time he became hooked on the services. When investigators visited Michael's new house to question him, but no one opened the door, despite his car being parked outside. After hearing the sound of running water, they broke down the door and found Michael in the bathtub with cuts on his wrists that he had done to himself. In his hand, he was holding a photo of Abby and Jennifer, a Bible, and a note claiming he was not involved in their murders. Michael was rushed to the hospital, where he received medical treatment and survived. During the investigation, the sheriff's department received an anonymous tip about Michael's van being spotted near Ridge Park on the day Abby and Jennifer disappeared. This location was only a minute from them home. As a result, the police resumed their search, focusing on a 60 kilometers radius around them home. The new search lasted for 11 days, but failed to yield any results in the specified area. Subsequently, the police obtained new information. Michael was suspected of stealing an industrial item worth about $500 from his workplace shortly before Abby and Jennifer disappeared. Detectives called Michael in for questioning, suspecting he might be involved in the workplace incident. Michael broke down in tears, fearing he would be falsely accused of his family's murder, but he did not confess to the crime. Later, he explained that his emotional reaction was triggered by the fear of being wrongly accused of killing his family. A colleague of Michael contacted the police and provided crucial information. On the day Jennifer disappeared, Michael took out the trash at work, which was unusual since it was not part of his job. According to the colleague, they normally took turns doing this task. However, on that particular day, Michael insisted on doing it himself. He reacted aggressively when his colleague offered to help. It now seemed clear that Michael was trying to dispose of evidence. On June 5, 2002, the police discovered a woman's body that matched Jennifer's description. The body was wrapped in some type of cover and had holes in it, with a bullet still lodged in her head. It appeared that the killer had discarded her body in a landfill. Forensic experts confirmed through dental records that the murdered woman was indeed Jennifer. They determined that she died from a close-range gunshot wound to the head. Additionally, they also was established that she was killed while sleeping, as a retainer was found in her mouth, which she only wore at night. Unfortunately, the body had lain in the open for 7 months, and as a result, the remains were severely decomposed, providing limited information for the investigators. Investigators found that there were several garbage sites assigned to different companies. After digging at the location where the Jennifer's body was found, they confirmed that this particular area was managed by the company where Michael worked. The police, considering this coincidence to be more than accidental, they intensified their search for Abby's body at the dump but were unsuccessful. Further investigation revealed that Michael had left the city without warning, relocating to a different state. Although Abby's body was not found at the dump, the evidence was sufficient to charge Michael with the murder of Abby and Jennifer. The relatives of Jennifer were deeply upset by the manner in which her body was treated, and they strongly suspected Michael of disposing of Abby's bodies in a similar way. The detectives were unable to find anyone who knew the suspect Michael well enough to approach. However, they then discovered that his mother was still alive. Since she lived in Georgia, a state he often visited, the detectives decided to pay her a visit. Upon arriving at her house, they were met by a man. He was identified as Michael, who was subsequently arrested and transported back to Colorado to face charges of double first-degree murder. Following Michael's capture, the search teams decided to re-examine the landfill area. They regrouped and brought in volunteers to aid in the search. Over the course of 7 weeks, they searched through 7,000 tons of trash, but unfortunately, they never found Abby's body. The prosecutor's office suspected that Michael was living a double life. On the surface, the family appeared perfect, but in reality, Michael was manipulative and cruel. However, his first wife did not support these claims, stating that she had never experienced insults or physical abuse from him. In contrast, several witnesses reported that Michael's relationship with Jennifer was troubled from the start, with frequent arguments even before they got married. Michael and Jennifer's issues stemmed from Michael's love for partying and spending time with friends, while Jennifer wanted to build a strong family and asked him to stop going out. Eventually, Jennifer issued an ultimatum, and Michael chose to commit to her. They got married, and soon after, they had a child. During this time, Michael was still serving in the Navy, which often left Jennifer alone to cope with postpartum depression and care for their newborn daughter. Although she faced many difficulties, but Jennifer never complained. However, the relationship began to deteriorate due to domestic issues. After that, Michael found a job as an engineer, and things seemed to improve. He also started teaching at a Sunday school. However, his fellow teachers disagreed with his teaching methods and views on discussing topics like sex and abortion with teenagers. His liberal approach clashed with the conservative values of the Sunday school, leading to him having to quit his job there. Following this, the Blagg family traveled a bit more before settling in a new location to start fresh. This move resulted in big debt because their house in South Carolina took a long time to sell. Jennifer was initially unhappy in their new home and frequently called her friends, wishing to return. However, since Michael was earning a good income and managing to pay off their debts, she chose to stay with him during this challenging time. Before the violent incident occurred, there seemed to be a serious issue in the marriage. A local law firm employee reported that a few days before Jennifer's disappearance, she sought marriage and family counseling. Unfortunately, she was turned away because the lawyer was on vacation. Jennifer revealed that she had been a victim of Michael's violence and wanted to initiate a divorce. The firm intended to assist her as soon as they returned, but she vanished before they could meet again. Although police searched her house, car, and garage, they found no traces of her blood. However, it was suspected that Abby was likely murdered because she may have witnessed her mother's, Jennifer, murder. It was believed that she was probably strangled, which could explain why there were no blood traces found. The prosecutor's office decided to pause proceedings to gather information about the child Abby. Without a body, proving the murder would be extremely challenging. Michael was released on bail and allowed to stay with his mother within the city while awaiting the hearing. Michael claimed he could not have killed his family, stating he had no motive. He insisted that family relations were good and mentioned he had been preparing for Christmas by buying gifts worth over $5,000 for his loved ones. However, no one found his claims credible. The hearings were scheduled for March 2004. It was believed that Jennifer wanted to end her relationship with her husband, Michael, who did not agree and became angry. The prosecutor's office suspected that he killed both his wife and possibly their daughter during the night, then hid their bodies and went to work in the morning, trying to dispose of them with the trash. After his work shift, Michael returned home and called the police. Jennifer's mother testified for the prosecution. At first, she supported Michael, but her opinion changed when she saw the evidence. She claimed that Michael had been abusive to Jennifer for a long time, particularly when he was drinking. During those times, he would often attack and choke Jennifer, sometimes leaving her unconscious. After 12 hours of deliberation, the jury found Michael guilty of murdering Jennifer and sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on April 16, 2004. Although the trial concluded, but Michael's story did not end there. 10 years later, Michael had a chance to retry his case. Throughout the years, his lawyers searched for any possible ways to appeal. One major issue was that one of the jurors was blind, making it difficult for him to fully assess the evidence presented. Additionally, a female juror had intentionally provided false information on her questionnaire. She later confessed, explaining that her bias against Michael stemmed from her own experiences as a long-term victim of domestic violence. This affected her ability to objectively consider the details of the case, resulting in her vote against him. As a result, the verdict was overturned, and preparations for a new trial began. The lying juror was found guilty of contempt of court and received the 10-day prison sentence along with a $10,000 fine. In a surprising turn, the defense introduced a new suspect, a man named Philip Ruins, from Montana. He was linked to a series of brutal rapes, and both Jennifer and Abby were among his many victims. In November 2001, it was reported that he was in Colorado around the same time Abby and Jennifer went missing. Philip had a history of brutal crimes but had never faced punishment until now. In 201st, a new trial was held for him. This time, the prosecution called in an expert to analyze the crime scene. The expert suggested that the arrangement of objects in the house indicated a staged crime rather than a genuine robbery. He noted that the crime was executed clumsily and unprofessionally. According to his assessment, Jennifer was shot while she was asleep in her bed. The assailant then held her down until her heart stopped, after which he removed her body from the house and placed it in a van. Unfortunately, the expert could not provide any useful information about Abby due to a lack of evidence. Michael's family said he was heartbroken after his wife and daughter went missing. They all embraced and cried together, creating a deeply emotional scene. They found it hard to believe that he could be involved in his wife's murder. During the interrogation and trial, Michael remained quiet and composed, showing little emotion. The prosecutor interpreted his calm demeanor as a sign of guilt. However, Michael's lawyer argued that such behavior was typical for a conservative husband. Despite the lawyer's efforts, Michael was once again found guilty of murdering his wife and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Meanwhile, investigators were also looking into Philip. He was a convicted sexual predator serving 200 years for creating and distributing child pornography and for sexually abusing minors. Philip lured his young victims through his online forum. When police searched Philip's home, they discovered a list of victims' names that included Jennifer and Abby, with the date of the kidnapping coincides with the time of their disappearance. However, there is no physical evidence linking Philip to this crime, no fingerprints or DNA were found at the scene, and his handwriting did not match any evidence. Additionally, it is unclear how Jennifer's body ended up in the landfill, where trash from her husband's workplace was dumped. As a result, investigators did not believe Philip was involved in the murder of Jennifer or the disappearance of Abby. However, the trial against Philip Ruins for various charges was difficult. Many of his victims experienced significant mental health problems due to the violence they endured. Some faced substance addiction, while others suffered from persistent nightmares. Unfortunately, there has been little advancement in the investigation into Abby's disappearance, as Philip has not admitted to the murders of either Jennifer or Abby. Abby's body has still not been located, and her fate remains unknown. She could possibly still be alive. A portrait of Abby has been created, and debates are ongoing about whether Michael is truly guilty of his wife's murder or if he was wrongfully convicted. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Lillelid family. Vidar Lillelid was from Bergen, Norway. At just 20 years old, he decided to Florida, USA, to pursue his dreams. As the youngest of 4 children, he had always been a modest homebody, filled with positivity and aspirations of having a wife, children, and a bright future. In February 1989, Vidar married Delfina Zelaya, an American of Honduran descent, whom he met through their mutual involvement in Jehovah's Witnesses. Then, they decided to move to Miami. In 1990, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Tabitha. However, they soon realized they wanted a quieter life away from the hustle and bustle of Miami, forcing them to seek a more peaceful place to raise their children. Vidar and Delfina found a home on the outskirts of Knoxville, in a suburb called Powell. This typical American suburb offered tranquility, beautiful natural scenery, and a tight-knit community. The young couple was warmly received by the locals, and it felt like their search for a better living environment had finally come to an end, allowing them to enjoy a serene life. In 1995, Vidar and Delfina welcomed their son, Peter. As time passed, they decided to move to a larger home where each family member could have their own room. In 1996, they found the house that was built 50 years earlier, known for its remarkable architectural design, located in the suburbs. Upon moving in, the family quickly began planning for the future. Their first priority was to renovate the old house extensively and build several outbuildings. The couple eagerly started the renovations house, focusing on the guest house. Although the young family was not wealthy and chose the house for its affordability, they were aware of the significant work ahead and were motivated to tackle the difficulty together. Friends and relatives remembered Vidar and Delfina was enthusiastic people, attached to their faith, family, and aspirations. They worked diligently, with Delfina employed at a local restaurant and dedicating her free time to her family. The couple was very religious, and in April 1997, their local congregation organized a special event in a neighboring state for those interested in deepening their faith and learning effective practices. On April 6, 1997, the final day of the meetings, the congregation invited the family to dinner. However, Vidar and Delfina were want to get home because didn't have enough money for the meal. They had already spent most of their savings on the trip and new clothes for the convention. The young couple, along with their children, thanked the congregation for the invitation but chose to celebrate in a smaller setting instead. To commemorate the occasion, Vidar and Delfina planned a picnic on their way back to create a festive atmosphere for the children. They began their journey, but during the drive, their son, Peter, started experiencing a severe headache and complained to his parents. It was already 7:30 p.m., and darkness was approaching. Vidar decided to pull off the highway in Greene County, Tennessee. He parked at a rest stop and took a walk with his son to help him feel better. Meanwhile, Delfina and Tabitha went to the restroom, where they ran into some unfamiliar girls. As they waited at the restroom exit, Peter was already outside with his father, Vidar. After their short walk, the boy felt better, and they waited for Delfina and Tabitha to return so they could have a snack. At that moment, several people noticed them. In Knoxville, a small motel housed a group of young people from Kentucky who had moved into one of the rooms. The group consisted of 6 individuals: 18 years old Natasha Cornett, 17 years old Karen Howell, 20 years old Joseph Reisner, 14 years old Jason Bryant, 19 years old Edward Dean Mullins, and 18 years old Crystal Sturgill. Many of them faced legal issues, had abusive parents, and came from troubled family backgrounds, often dealing with domestic violence and academic struggles. These young people banded together to live and often lived together in a motel, often renting a room for a long period of time. On April 4th, they checked into a motel in Columbus, just days before the incident occurred in Tennessee. Their unusual and daring behavior quickly attracted the attention of the motel staff. They drew pentagrams and other symbols on the walls, feeling liberated and free from the supervision of older generations. This led them to disregard moral and social norms. Initially, their actions seemed to have a connection to occultism and self-harm. At night, candles flickered outside the motel windows. These young people used razors to cut their hands, which was both a protest against their difficult experiences and a silent plea for help that went unnoticed. This group was an attached relationship, with most having endured years of cruelty and oppression, ultimately leading to a series of the tragic incidents. The young people often acted inappropriately and caused big damage to the motel room. They broke furniture and painted on the walls, turning the room into a place resembling a drug den. Some of their actions appeared ritualistic, reflecting their inner turmoil. They actively took part in occult practices linked to Satan, but they sought to push the boundaries further. Psychiatrists who worked with these young people later realized that they were searching for their identity in life. Unfortunately, they had experienced years of abuse and cruelty, leading to a deep-seated resentment towards the world around them. In this environment, violence and bloodshed became common and a way for them to assert power among their peers. It's clear that their minds were not filled with good intentions or kindness. They formed a secretive community that was prepared for more than just drawing pentagrams. They were out for revenge. The most ruthless leader of this group was Natasha Cornett, who stated her intention to start Armageddon and insisted that nothing would stop them. They were resolute in their desire for revenge against the world. Before Natasha, there had been similar confessions, but they were largely overlooked. This lack of attention to her words likely contributed to her extreme actions. Natasha stated that she had been communicating with angels and demons since she was a child. From a young age, she referred to herself as the daughter of Satan and became obsessed with witchcraft, which worsened due to alcohol and drug abuse. In 7th grade, she developed an eating disorder that eventually resulted in her hospitalization in Lexington. Doctors diagnosed her with severe manic-depressive tendencies and a propensity for self-harm and harming others. At 14, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for troubled teenagers. The doctors worked hard to help her with her social and family issues, but unfortunately, their efforts did not yield the desired results. At 17, Natasha fell in love and married a man named Stephen Cornett. However, when Stephen realized that Natasha had serious emotional issues and posed a danger to herself and others, he decided to end their relationship. This breakup deeply affected Natasha, who was already struggling with her mental health, and her condition worsened after she moved to New Orleans. There, she suffered a brutal attack by 5 men, which resulted in severe emotional trauma and further deterioration of her mental state. Natasha became obsessed with the movie Natural Born Killers, which features a young couple traveling across America and committing murders. At one point, she threatened her mother with a knife and ran away from home. During this period, she was at her most unstable, posing a genuine threat to herself and those around her. She sought a way to bring her dark fantasies, inspired by the film, to life. After leaving home, Natasha met a group of people who shared the same difficulties as her. Among them was her best friend, Karen Howell, who was also interested in witchcraft. Karen came from a troubled family and had a history of substance abuse and alcohol problems. She often caused disruptions, both at home and elsewhere. During her school years, she witnessed her parents' tumultuous relationship, including violent arguments and physical abuse from her father. Like Natasha, Karen struggled with thoughts of self-harm and attempted to end one's own life 4 times. Karen's behavior was very unstable, making she could not integrate at school because she was often scolded and criticized by her teachers. She changed schools 4 times and eventually ended up being homeschooled. However, being at home with toxic parents only made her situation worse. During this time, she began holding spiritual sessions in an attempt to communicate with demonic beings, which was made worse by regular substance use. Karen became a passenger in a car that was transporting weapons for a gang. Driving the unreliable car was her boyfriend, Joseph Reisner, who was born in Khazar on October 13, 1976. He never knew his biological father and took on his stepfather's surname when the family moved to Georgia. Joseph's parents' relationship deteriorated significantly, leading to their divorce. His mother, Mary, became actively involved in church activities. By then, Joseph had a reputation as a drug user. he started using drugs at the age of 10 and quickly progressed to harder substances. Joseph claimed to have had intimate experiences with 2 nannies who took care of him. His mother remarried when he was 18, but he continued to use illegal drugs, struggling to connect with his peers. He dated Natasha for a while but broke up with her, although they remained friendly. He then began a relationship with Natasha's best friend, Karen. In December, Joseph joined the army, hoping to build a military career. However, he struggled with substance abuse and was discharged. Feeling lost, he decided to leave everything behind and join a group led by Natasha. During this time, Natasha began dating Edward Dean Mullins, who was born on January 26, 1978. Edward came from a reputable family and did not usually have problems with the law. He worked at a grocery store and was very religious, attending church with his family. However, this changed after he met Natasha. She begins to control him, causing his behavior to change in a worrying direction. He stopped attending church and sided with Natasha against his parents, who were trying to help him return to a healthier life. Sadly, Natasha's influence outweighed his mother's concerns. Edward eventually ran away from home and moved into a motel. Their relationship deepened to the point where they began planning a wedding. The youngest member of the group was 14 years old Jason Bryant, born on July 18, 1982, in the small coal mining town of Helia. Despite his age, he had been on the police's radar for some time. His problems began after he using drugs and alcohol. In fact, his struggles started even earlier, as he had a developmental delay discovered in school, with an IQ of only 85. This thing caused emotional and social issues that negatively affected his life. His parents were indifferent to his struggles, and it was only after meeting Natasha that he decided to become part of the group. During this time, he was involved in a rehabilitation program where specialists tried to help him improve his condition. Unfortunately, their efforts were not enough, and he ultimately gave up on trying to change. Jason and Natasha even engaged in drinking each other's blood, believing it to be a demonstration of their deep love, convinced that it would strengthen their connection. On March 13, 1979, in the city of Harold, there was a girl named Crystal Sturgill who excelled in her studies. However, her life changed when she began using substances during high school. Crystal started smoking in the locker room, which frustrated her teachers. More serious issues emerged in December 1996, when Crystal entered adolescence. She began arguing frequently with her parents and isolated herself at home, which eventually led to her filing a police report. Crystal accused her father of long-term abuse and rape. She claimed that this abuse only ceased after she began dating. Her father denied the allegations, calling her a liar. Following a trial, Crystal was placed under the care of social services. Over time, she lived with 13 different foster families before meeting Natasha and joining her group. In fact, Natasha's Armageddon Cornet plan is already starting to become a reality. On April 6th, the group broke into the home of a police officer living nearby. The homeowner was OTV. They successfully entered, stealing pistols of the .&P caliber, 2 boxes of ammunition, and $500 in cash. This marked the beginning of their plot for the apocalypse becoming a reality. Afterward, they returned to Nashville to commence their violent rampage. The group, made up of reckless young people, was traveling in a car that was in poor condition, seemingly on the verge of breaking down. The driver, worried about the car's reliability, was speeding over 30 kilometers per hour above the limit when the police stopped them. They received a fine, but this was just one of many legal issues they would encounter. Ultimately, the 6 Satanists, including Natasha, Edward, Joseph, Jason, Karen, Crystal, armed and prepared, safely reached their destination. They understood that they needed a reliable car to execute their plans. A key task for them was to find an appropriate vehicle, which they planned to steal. They had to move fast before their Chevrolet completely failed. As they continued their journey, prepared for serious crimes, they came across a woman named Delfina Zelaya, who was heading home and had paused at a restroom. While Karen and Natasha went into the restroom, the rest of their group waited in the vehicle. They began discussing their criminal plans and suddenly remembered they had left evidence of their earlier speeding violation. At that moment, they had weapons and money with cartridges in the car, which made them realize they could face serious legal trouble. To avoid getting caught, they decided they needed to change cars. Initially, they considered burning the vehicle. Just then, they spotted Peter and his father, Vidar, as the Lillelid family parked nearby. Natasha's group immediately attracted the attention of the Lillelid family when they came out of the restroom. Delfina approaches Natasha and Karen, who are wearing multiple layers of clothing. She asked if they believed in God, but they said no. She then offered them a religious brochure, while her friendly husband, Vidar, invited the people in Natasha's group to join their picnic. Natasha's group, identifying as Satanists, saw that the family Lillelid had come in a van, which they thought was ideal for their malicious intentions. This sparked a dark plan in the minds of Natasha's group decided to act. They casually joined the family's Lillelid meal. Joseph and Jason were the first to approach the table, followed closely by Natasha and Karen. Seizing the opportunity, Joseph slipped away to the car, where Edward and Crystal were waiting. He quietly informed them that it was time to act. Joseph then and people in their group moved stealthily through the parking lot, ensuring no one was watching. Joseph aimed his gun at Vidar, apologized for the situation, and warned that nothing would happen if his family obeyed them. Raised the gun at Vidar, Joseph led him to the minivan. Vidar offered money and a car in exchange for his family release, but Natasha's group insisted on taking all his family to a remote location. They drove the entire family away, with Natasha, Karen, and Jason following closely behind. Joseph remained in his Chevrolet with Edward and Crystal. Vidar was driving the minivan, while one of the kidnappers, armed with a 9mm pistol, kept him under control. The company drove several kilometers before taking a turn onto the first side road they found. After traveling a bit further, they stopped in an isolated area. Holding hands tightly, Lillelid family prayed to God for protection from their predicament. Meanwhile, Natasha's group began to discuss their next steps. Natasha hesitated to release Lillelid's family for fear they might report them to the police. Vidar and his family were once again offered money in exchange for their freedom, pleading to be released with a promise not to inform the police. Natasha's group argued among themselves, with some advocating for the execution of the entire Lillelid family. Jason was against releasing Lillelid family, but assured that he would not harm Tabitha and Peter. He persuaded Karen and Natasha to go back to the van where Joseph was waiting. Shortly after, gunfire erupted in the street during the summer. Vidar was shot multiple times. The first bullet struck his eye, followed by 5 shots fired at close range into his chest using 2 pistols stolen from a police officer. The assailant then shot Delfina 8 times, with 2 bullets breaking her femur, 1 hitting her arm, and ultimately, she was shot in the stomach while already on the ground. Both Delfina and Vidar were killed with pistols of different calibers. The medical examiner concluded that 28-year-old Delfina did not die instantly. Instead, it struggled for about 20 minutes after the attack. Unfortunately, Natasha's group did not stop there. They broke their promise and they turned to attack Tabitha and Peter. With Tabitha, they shot her once in the head with a .25 caliber weapon. As for Peter, they fired 2 shots. The first bullet entered behind the right ear and exited through the right eye, while the second shot hit the back and pierced the right lung. This account of incident is based on the testimony of Natasha Cornett, whose story aligns most closely with the evidence. However, she is not considered completely reliable. From the start, Natasha claimed that Jason was responsible for the murders. In contrast, Jason defended himself by stating that he could not commit such acts of cruelty and pointed to Joseph as the actual killer. At that time, Joseph said he was sitting in the van with his eyes closed to avoid seeing what was happening outside. He alleged that all the criminals, including Natasha, Edward, Jason, Karen, and Crystal, were involved in the massacre, but Jason was identified as the scapegoat because he was a minor and could not be tried as an adult. Such a terrible crime could lead to the death penalty. The criminals were caught fairly quickly. A construction worker at a nearby site, who had spent the night in the building, heard gunshots. At first, he thought they were just hunters and ignored them. However, after a disturbing silence, he heard loud laughter, which made him uneasy. He described the laughter as sending shivers down his spine, followed by more gunfire. This combination of frightening sounds raised his suspicions, leading him to call the police. At the crime scene, the police encountered a shocking sight, 4 bodies were piled in a ditch. As officers got closer, they found Delphina in pain, but she died shortly after their arrival. Vidar was already dead, and Tabitha was lying face down on him. Despite her severe gunshot wound, Tabitha was still breathing. When a police officer approached, he found Peter lying there. The boy cried, and the officer stayed with him while immediately calling for medics. The officer comforted Peter by holding his hand until the ambulance came. Tabitha and Peter were then airlifted to a regional hospital where they fought for their lives with the help of doctors. Sadly, 6-year-old Tabitha did not survive. Nearby, an abandoned blue Chevrolet still faintly illuminated the darkness with its headlights. Tire tracks belonging to a family van were also discovered at the scene. A plan was devised to track down the criminals, leading to the blockage of all nearby roads. Police stopped vehicles, focusing on a Chevrolet abandoned by the miners known at the scene of a massacre. Although the car's identification number was found, it had been removed and discarded about a kilometer from the site. The police then contacted Joseph's mother, who had reported him missing 2 days before the incident. She also mentioned Natasha, whom Joseph intended to elope with to Mexico. Their vehicle was detained at the Mexican border, where they had no identification documents. On April 8, around 5 p.m., they arrived at the U.S. border, and their car was checked against a database. It was discovered that the van was stolen and that the individuals might be involved in a triple murder. As a result, the group comprised of Natasha Cornett, Edward Dean Mullins, and Crystal Sturgill was arrested. After being detained, they quickly confessed to stealing the car and admitted to their involvement in the murders. They started telling a ridiculous story claiming that the Lillelid family died in an accident, saying they had been run over by a minivan during a U-turn. However, the police were aware that the Lillelid family had actually been shot, with gunshot wounds on their arms and legs. There were many conflicting accounts about how these injuries occurred. The judge received multiple requests from the defense to hold separate hearings for each defendant. The lawyers also asked for individual hearings. But all these requests were denied. For older defendants, including Natasha, Edward, Crystal, Joseph, faced the possibility of the death penalty, while Karen and Jason could receive life sentences without the chance of parole. The local community rallied together, demanding the death penalty for these violent criminals. Each hearing attracted a crowd outside the court, chanting for justice. During the interrogations, each person in Natasha's group attempted to blame one another for the crime. Most of them pointed fingers at Jason, citing his young age as a reason for their accusations. However, their accounts were all inconsistent, making it difficult to establish a clear timeline of incident or determine who actually shot Lillelid family. This uncertainty has led to ongoing debates, but the judge concluded that each member of the group contributed to the circumstances that resulted in the family's shooting. While not everyone pulled the trigger, all were present during the kidnapping and murder and did nothing to intervene. Despite having the chance to help, but none of them tried to save the Lillelid family, resulting in their shared guilt. The hearings commenced in March 1998. By this time, all 6 individuals had, including Natasha, Edward, Crystal, Joseph, Jason, Karen, on their lawyer's advice, pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal with the prosecution. This agreement secured them life sentences without the possibility of parole and allowed them to avoid the death penalty. However, many local residents opposed this thing, calling for the execution of the underage offenders. The 6 individuals are still seeking to have their cases reviewed, arguing that they were too young to fully understand their actions and that they were unable to resist the influence of the others. They continue to deny their involvement and shift blame among themselves. The first person to appeal was the group leader, Natasha, who, along with the others, was denied in 2017. Karen submitted a letter claiming her innocence, stating that she did not participate in the shooting of the Lillelid family and did not deserve life imprisonment alongside the actual murderers. She also addressed rumors that their group was a cult and that they arranged the bodies in a cross shape, asserting that these accusations were false and that they were merely a group of troubled teenagers. However, Karen's appeal was also denied because it was impossible to ascertain the level of involvement of each group member in the crime. 2 years old, Peter was the only survivor from Lillelid's family. The boy underwent a long recovery process, both mentally and physically, and now wears an eye prosthesis. Later, a custody battle ensued between the Vidar and Delfina families for Peter's care. In the end, he moved to Sweden to live with his aunt. Although he never completely overcame the trauma, he returned to the US as an adult, where he started a family and built a career. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kimberly Wenger. Kimberly Wenger was born on September 25, 1963, in Bloomington, Illinois, USA. She grew up in a family of 3 siblings. However, her parents' relationship deteriorated, eventually leading to a divorce and her mother having to take care of the children. Kimberly was healthy, beautiful, and very active. She was a member of the cheerleading squad at her school, where she was quite popular. She regularly attended cheerleading camps and was highly regarded by both teachers and students. Her outgoing personality and beauty made it easy for her to make friends and socialize with her peers. Kimberly aspired to become a film actress and even achieved some success in this field. Notably, she appeared as an extra in the famous film Grand Vue. The filming took place in 1983 in Panty, Illinois, where Kimberly decided to try her luck, and it paid off. This experience became one of the most memorable moments of her life. During this time, Kimberly's mother fulfilled her long-cherished dream of owning a business by purchasing a bar with her grandmother's inheritance. Kimberly joined her mother, hoping to become part of the business. However, disagreements over her mother's vision led Kimberly to leave the company. In 1985, Kimberly met a young man named Thatcher Wenger and they began dating. Kimberly found him to be loving and kind. She soon became pregnant and they welcomed a daughter named Kelsey. The couple later married. Unfortunately, after the wedding, Thatcher's behavior changed, he becoming more cruel. This change, coupled with financial difficulties, made their situation tense. Despite taking care of the children, Kimberly found their finances inadequate and wanted to work part-time. However, she faced challenges in finding a suitable job. The family situation worsened and the couple later divorced. Kimberly soon began dating another man, Dale Fosdick. However, this relationship also failed. Dale admitted that he wanted to end things as soon as he learned that she was pregnant with his child. Not ready to be a father, he decided to disappear. Kimberly was devastated by the news because she had hoped to start a family with him. Her friends said that after the breakup, Kimberly felt abandoned and anxious because of 2 failed relationships. In the midst of this turmoil, Kimberly seriously considered terminating the pregnancy but ultimately decided to keep the baby. She gave birth to her second child, a boy named Logan. Although he broke up with Dale, he later showed up and agreed to support his son. He paid a small amount of child support from his salary, but he was not reliable in this regard. Dale was often late with his payments. They were inconsistent and clearly not enough to live comfortably and raise a child. As a result, Kimberly had to go to work while her friends took care of the children. At the time, Kimberly worked as a hairdresser. She also found extra income by working as a nanny and cleaning lady. This helped a little with the family's needs, but they were all on food stamps and lived quite poorly. Kimberly and her mother had a bad relationship, so her mother did not help her. When her son was very young, Kimberly met a pastor named Kurt Simon. They were both struggling financially, but despite their hardships, they developed a deep affection for each other and were happy together. Determined to find stability and face their challenges, Kurt loved Kimberly so much that he planned to adopt her children, and Logan even started calling him Dad. They seemed like a wonderful couple, happy and loving, unaware of the threat looming over them. On Saturday, May 22, 1993, at around 10:30 p.m., the couple returned home from a short trip. They had traveled to Quincy, where Kurt's parents lived, so his family could meet Kimberly and bless their upcoming wedding. During the trip, they also visited the university's theological seminary. Taking advantage of the opportunity, they arranged their engagement just a day before returning to Illinois. They gathered friends nearby to celebrate. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they seemed like the perfect couple. Close friends and family were thrilled about their decision, making this an important and joyful event for Kimberly and Kurt. Kurt returned in high spirits, eager to spend the entire weekend together. The following day, they planned to attend a concert featuring Kimberly's daughter, Kelsey. Kelsey, who studied at a music school, was recognized as a young prodigy. Her parents fully supported her and were eager to attend the event, intending to further encourage her by hosting a family gathering at a pizza parlor afterward. The couple arrived home in their family car and parked in the driveway. Kurt exited the car first to bring some luggage into the house. When he went back for the rest, he found Kimberly outside, smiling at him. She remarked that it felt warmer there compared to Iowa, her last words before she opened the front door. As Kimberly entered the house, a huge explosion suddenly occurred, violently throwing Kurt backwards. The explosion was so powerful that it woke the neighbors and shattered the windows of the surrounding houses. In shock, Kurt rushed into the ruined house and found Kimberly lying motionless on the floor. The right side of her skull was missing, destroyed by the explosion or debris. Tragically, Kurt could do nothing to save Kimberly. Kurt was in shock and couldn't believe what was happening. Luckily, the children had stayed with Kimberly's relatives and didn't join them on the trip. Kurt called 911 and stayed with her until the police arrived. The officers responded quickly and found Kurt crying, kneeling in the rubble of the house, holding his beloved's head in his arms. She was only 29 years old when she died. This event was strange and unusual for the entire local community in such a quiet place. People feared their homes might also be rigged to explode, so they asked the police for protection. Fortunately, no such threats were found. Explosives experts quickly scanned the crime scene to determine the best course of action and found a suspicious package in the hallway of the home. The package was rigged to explode if moved, activated by a button. When Kimberly entered the house, she noticed the unfamiliar package and, out of curiosity, attempted to inspect it. The package exploded at face level, killing her instantly. During the crime scene investigation, forensic experts discovered various bomb-making materials in the basement, such as wires, fuses, and battery wrappers. Discarded rubber gloves were also found in the trash. Although Kurt was present during the explosion, he suffered only minor injuries. As a result, the police initially considered him the main suspect. In full view of their shocked neighbors, Kurt was handcuffed, read his rights, and taken to the police station for questioning. He cooperated with the investigation, providing his fingerprints and DNA, and recounted the events leading up to the tragedy. Kurt was released hours later. His active cooperation in the investigation gave hope that the criminal would be apprehended soon. Considering Kurt was not involved in the incident, it is likely that the perpetrator brought the tools and parts needed to make the bomb. Since the entrance doors and windows were not damaged, it appears the attacker had a way into the house. The police thought this was a deliberate act of revenge against Kimberly. To avoid accidentally setting off the bomb while transporting it, the attacker probably put it together at the scene. The explosive was powerful and meant to destroy the house and kill everyone inside, which would also get rid of any evidence linking the attacker to the crime. Luckily, and some evidence was left intact, giving investigators important information. After Kurt was cleared of any wrongdoing by a solid alibi, the police questioned who would want to harm the Kimberly family. Kurt pointed them to Kimberly's mother, Cricket Lewis, who was now married to someone else and had a different last name. Kurt viewed Cricket as evil and the only person capable of such a terrible act. Cricket and Kimberly had a poor relationship, which prompted Cricket to resent Kurt. Kurt claimed that Cricket was only interested in running her bar and was indifferent to everything else. She was described as harsh and inexplicably hostile to others. Kimberly's relationship with her mother was strained and they rarely saw each other. Financial gain and power were very important to Cricket. She pushed her daughter to open a bar, allegedly making money through dubious means. Cricket inherited the fortune from her grandmother, who died suddenly despite being in good health. While the investigation was ongoing, no evidence was found to link Cricket to her grandmother's death, which was ruled to be due to natural causes. After Kimberly began working at Cricket's bar, she was exploited, receiving low wages and bonuses that were not as good as those of other employees. Despite trying to resolve her financial problems with the help of her loved ones, Kimberly only faced more challenges. Realizing the situation, Kimberly abandoned her delusions and left the bar. At Kimberly's funeral, Cricket seemed to be concerned only about losing Kimberly's insurance policy, which meant she would not receive financial compensation for her daughter's death. However, the police investigation found no evidence of malicious intent on Cricket's part. They found that she was focused on running her business. After carefully examining the information and witness statements, the police found that Cricket had no motive for the crime. It was concluded that she did not have the technical skills and abilities to build a bomb herself, and her alibi was found to be credible. When the investigation resumed, the next suspect was Kimberly's ex-husband, Thatcher Wenger. Kurt Thatcher had been involved in a custody dispute over Kimberly, making him a possible suspect in the planning and execution of the crime. Thatcher lived only 3 kilometers from the couple and worked as an engineer, suggesting that he may have had the skills and equipment to build an explosive device. However, after examining the relationship between Kimberly and Thatcher, police found that their interactions were generally friendly, with minor disagreements resolved through simple discussions. The investigation found that Thatcher had no motive for the murder and had a credible alibi that was verified. The next suspect was Kimberly's co-worker, Phil Hartman, whom she had accused of harassment in an earlier police complaint. Phil later threatened to retaliate aggressively. He admitted that he had tried to pursue a relationship with Kimberly, but she had a negative opinion of him, which led him to abandon the relationship. However, Phil also had a confirmed alibi, as he lived far from Bloomington and was out of town when the couple returned. Police also considered Logan's father, Dale Fosdick, a suspect. Dale, 31, lived on the east side of town, near Kimberly's home, and worked in the aircraft industry, assembling miniature models. Dale's expertise with equipment and ability to overhaul automotive engines made him a potential perpetrator. Police went to Dale's home with a search warrant, and he cooperated with their investigation. They found tools for assembling a device on the kitchen table, which looked suspicious. Police also discovered a large amount of components that could be used to make explosives. Several tools were confiscated, but the most notable was a pair of pliers, as the markings on the tool matched those found on bomb components in Kimberly's home. Dale also had receipts from Walmart for ammunition and other materials that closely resembled those used to make explosive devices. When the remains of the explosives were analyzed, a forensic scientist learned that they matched the components used to make explosives found at Kimberly's home. Initially, police had little evidence because most of it had been destroyed in the explosion. Forensic analysis required examining all of the evidence under a microscope. Finally, advanced methods such as gas chromatography and mass spectrometry provide direct evidence. One expert noted a distinctive design feature: 2 holes drilled into one end of the cap, which looked like the criminal's unique signature. Law enforcement databases have about 20 records of homemade devices used in crimes, with a handful matching this design. The attacker quickly assembled a random design that fit their target. Forensic experts continue to examine the remaining pieces of the device in detail. Police knew that most of the suspects had nothing to do with the massacre. Their efforts focused on proving the guilt of Dale, who had been found with suspicious items in his home. These items were stored in a basement workshop. Dale was a lonely young man living in a small house in the suburbs of Bloomington. He became upset when he discovered that his ex-girlfriend was engaged to someone else, which may have led to feelings of jealousy and revenge. This gave him a real motive for the crime, making him one of the few acquaintances of the victim to have such a motive. Forensic experts also identified other important details. The attacker used 2 different types of gunpowder, which when combined, increased the force of the explosion. A look at the crime scene showed that the explosion was so powerful that most of Kimberly's house was destroyed. Many who knew Dale believed that he could not have committed such a crime. Usually, such thoughts do not occur to good people. Police searched for any signs of cruelty or aggression in Dale's past before this violent incident. He had no history of violent crimes, legal problems, arrests for similar crimes, or drug addictions. According to many, he had recently shown concern for his child and was trying to improve his relationship with Kimberly. However, because of certain items found in his home, he became the prime suspect. He was arrested for first-degree murder and held in state prison while awaiting trial. The first trial was declared invalid due to insufficient evidence. During the hearing, a juror became ill and was unable to continue, leading to a second trial. At trial, the defense presented Dale as a devoted father and a kind, humble man, arguing that he was incapable of committing a heinous and vicious crime. His attorneys emphasized his role as a caring and loving father to convince the jury of his innocence. Dale initially objected to his girlfriend's pregnancy and fatherhood because he felt he was too young. When Kimberly decided to keep the child, he shunned her. However, he later realized his mistake and completely changed his attitude. He decided to accept paternity and aimed to restore his relationship with both his son and Kimberly, even hoping to marry her. Dale argued that there was no reason for him to harm the woman with whom he planned to start a family. On Dale's side, even the mother of the Kimberly supported him. Cricket was still convinced that her fiancé, Kurt Simon, was the murderer. The mother claimed that Kurt, who was aspiring to be a pastor, had recently become cruel and controlling towards Kimberly. This situation led to many disagreements, but there were clear inconsistencies in her claims because Kimberly rarely communicated with her mother and couldn't have known about their relationship issues. Cricket defended the Dale in every way possible. She highlighted that Dale showed her attention and tried to gain Kimberly's trust. He frequently visited to spend time with the child and had changed significantly for the better. Dale Fosdick repeatedly expressed his love, apologized for his past decisions, and tried to win Kimberly over. However, she was firm in her commitment to her new boyfriend Kurt and had no intention of breaking up. In fact, the couple planned to get married and confirmed this by getting engaged. The prosecutor's office warned that the Kimberly's decision could have dire consequences once Dale realized there was no chance of rekindling their relationship. Seeking revenge, Dale likely targeted Kurt. Despite Dale's careful planning, the Kurt miraculously survived. During the trial, one of Kimberly's sisters and her mother supported Dale, claiming his innocence. Despite this, the prosecution made a strong case. Explosives experts provided direct evidence that a large number of parts and materials suitable for making bombs were found in his home and proved that they were used to make bombs. According to S.H. Moore, Dale expressed a willingness to support Kimberly financially, but he preferred to quit his job rather than pay alimony. Meanwhile, Kimberly wanted the financial support she was entitled to from the negligent biological father of her son, so she planned to seek justice through the court. During this time, Dale grew worried that Kimberly would move away with their son to live with her fiancé. Several of Dale's co-workers mentioned his intention to gain custody of Logan to avoid alimony payments. To achieve this, he gathered evidence to discredit Kimberly, hoping it would help him strip her of parental rights and gain custody of their son. Neighbors reported seeing Dale near Kimberly's home before the explosion. Kimberly kept a spare key under the rug, allowing Dale easy access to her home. Many described Dale as a quiet, unassuming, even shy person who seemed unlikely to commit a violent crime. He was known to avoid conflict and was always positive. However, the prosecutor's office argued that Dale's personality influenced his choice of method in eliminating his victim. Not wanting to confront Kimberly directly, he resorted to a surprise and cowardly attack using an explosive device. On February 26, 1996, the jury found Dale Fosdick guilty of first-degree murder. After the verdict, the mother of the Kimberly expressed her disagreement with the decision, stating that Dale could seek her help if he needed it. She held his hand, tears in her eyes, and kissed him on the cheek, believing he was a victim of a miscarriage of justice. Dale had 25 supporters who actively defended his innocence in court. Only one juror voted against the death penalty, which was enough to spare him from it. Consequently, he was sentenced to 55 years in prison. Cricket Lewis, Kimberly's mother, continued to fight for Dale's innocence. In May 1996, she wrote a letter to the local media. She acknowledged that her stance had caused considerable public outrage and that she had faced criticism for supporting Dale, the convicted man. She was upset when her daughter's fiancé Kurt described her as the embodiment of evil in a media interview. Cricket asserted that she mourned her daughter every day and believed that the real killer was still at large. Cricket died at 65 on December 19, 2003. Her son-in-law, Kurt Simon, became a minister at the First Presbyterian Church after her death. Right after her mother's death, Kelsey moved in with her father, Thatcher Wenger, at the Salvation Army and worked in homeless shelters. Thatcher passed away at 52 on November 27, 2003. Dale was in prison and died of natural causes at 48 in 2010. Logan graduated from college, joined the Bloomington Police Force, started a family, and has a child.